So I'll be presenting on using asynchronous video interviews to enhance self-awareness of video communication skills in a community college setting. I know that's a mouthful, but that is the title of my thesis. So what I'll be doing over the next 20 minutes or so is kind of going through, first I'll give you a background of why I chose this topic. Then I'll talk about the purpose of my research and what the research questions were. I'll do a very brief overview of my literature review and talk about the gaps that I addressed in my research. Then I'll share what methods I used and the limitations of those methods. And then of course I'll share the results and the conclusions. So I've been working in adult and post-secondary education for about 10 years, primarily teaching communications-related content. And when I finished university in 2010, I spent about 6 years looking for full-time employment without success. So I tried using the video resume you see here to stand out, and it worked. I secured a full-time position because of my video resume. So that same year that I created the video resume, I also started my master's program. And once I decided to take on a thesis, I knew I wanted my topic to be related to video resumes. So I started researching the term, and that's when I came across asynchronous video interviews. So I had never heard of them before. So if anyone listening today has never heard of them, neither had I until I started doing my research for my thesis. So while both types of videos have the purpose of securing employment, video resumes such as this one are initiated by job seekers, in this case me, while asynchronous video interviews are initiated by employers. So employers email a link to a video interview platform, and candidates are required to record their responses to job interview questions. Their video is then viewed by the employer, who decides whether to bring that candidate in for a second interview. And this process claims to save time and expense in scheduling, interviewing, and traveling, as well as open opportunities to a larger number of applicants. So from my perspective as an educator, asynchronous video interviews seem to be the more beneficial and practical topic to research. So fast forward to March 11th of this year. On March 11th, I delivered my 3-minute thesis presentation about the emerging trend of asynchronous video interviews in the hiring process and the resulting need to start training students in video communication skills to set them up for success for this interview method. I shared that there are already over 100 video interview platforms on the market, and that artificial intelligence was being used to create predictive tools for candidate selection using metadata from existing video interviews. I also shared that the practice of using AVIs was expected to be mainstream in the next 2 to 5 years. Well, just 6 days later, on March 17th, in the province of Ontario at least, that time to mainstream adoption became immediate as the pandemic forced everyone online and communicating with video. So while this research was completed pre-pandemic, it's probably more relevant and empathy-inducing today than it was when I delivered my 3-minute thesis presentation. And I say empathy-inducing because a lot of us were forced out of our comfort zones. We quickly became aware of how uncomfortable it can be to appear on camera, how awkward it is to make eye contact with a camera lens or to know where to look while appearing in self-facing videos, how frustrating webcam technology can be, in addition to knowing how to get the best sound quality or lighting for your video, how challenging it can be to find a suitable location and position for your computer in order to appear professional while not exposing your personal life to the world, how intrusive and uncomfortable it can feel to know you're being critiqued by viewers of your video, and furthermore, how unfair it may have seemed to have not had a choice. It's probably safe to say that we all quickly realized the importance of video communication skills as we observed online behaviors that only memes are made of. So interestingly, the issues that revealed themselves over the past few months relate directly to my research. So the purpose of my research was to explore the value of using an asynchronous video interview assignment to enhance self-awareness of video communication skills for employment interview purposes. So the first question I addressed was, Does asynchronous video interview practice relate to self-awareness of video communication skills? Does peer assessment of those video interviews relate to self-awareness? And how can using asynchronous video interview practice help post-secondary educators develop students' video communication skills? So the literature review consisted of a search within 3 main themes: communication skills, asynchronous video interviews, and peer assessment. The consistent message in the literature on communication skills was just how important this skill set is for employment-related success. So it's not surprising, as communication skills are among the essential employability skills for graduates of post-secondary studies in Ontario. There's a rich body of research from a variety of post-secondary programs documenting how video was used to assess skills transferable to workplace contexts, but not video communication skills directly. In fact, I could not find a definition for video communication skills. So for the purpose of this thesis, video communication skills for asynchronous video interviews include competency with not only digital technology to record self-facing videos, but also on-camera presentation and speaking skills. Next was my research, and my research was on peer and self-assessment. So previous research highlighted how incorporating both peer and self-assessment into tasks contribute to an authentic assessment experience. And authentic assessment includes both peer and self-assessment of a public presentation or performance that is representative of a real-world context. So in all instances where video was used, self-assessment was a key component, but peer assessment was not. However, the literature revealed that the value of peer assessment revealed the value and showed how it's reliable when 5 or more peers are part of that assessment task. In my search for literature on asynchronous video interviews, I was looking for studies that used video to assess communication skills specifically for asynchronous video interview training. I only found 2 studies, and although both used participants from university populations as opposed to community college students, the findings from those studies had crossover to the findings in my study, particularly as relates to challenges with nonverbal communication and confidence. The literature on AVIs primarily focused on perceptions, and the consistent message was that they were perceived as fair if they were not mandatory, and while they were perceived as fair, participants still preferred in-person interviews. Another consistent message was that the trend was becoming more popular. Also revealed through the research on AVIs was how artificial intelligence was being used to develop predictive tools for recruiters that will further streamline the hiring process. Interestingly, the Gartner Hype Cycle, which provides industry-specific insights into technology trends from ideation to acceptance and is based on the market adoption curve, video recruiting appeared first on that hype cycle in 2013 as technology that was on the rise. By 2018, it was up here on the peak of expectations, and then it slowly went down into the trough of disillusionment, where it still is slowly coming out of. But that trough of disillusionment has a negative overtone, but it's actually the position on the curve where challenges and obstacles are recognized and corrected as it approaches mainstream adoption, called the plateau of productivity. And interestingly, artificial intelligence in talent acquisition actually sits right here on the curve as technology that's on the rise, and the prediction to mainstream adoption for that is 10 to 15 years. Interestingly, while I was completing my thesis, I was invited by the Canadian Marketing Association to participate in a video series with their CMA Next program. And their CMA Next program is a video series for students and new graduates, mainly of marketing programs. And they understood that there's value in learning how to market yourself on video. And I got to do a series of 5 videos specifically talking about asynchronous video interviews as a result of my thesis. So the gaps that my research addressed with communication skills, the research primarily dealt with self-reflection of communication skills that were transferable to in-person contexts, whereas my research focused on self-awareness of video communication skills directly. With asynchronous video interviews, the literature previously focused on perceptions, whereas my research focused on preparation for AVIs. Past research with assessment, most research did use self-assessment. Mine used peer and self-assessment. And previous research used university level participants, whereas my research engaged community college level participants. So what were the methods? I used a pre and post questionnaire, and the pre-questionnaire was meant to set a baseline so I would understand where students were at. So with their communication competence, like how confident were they in their communication skills? Also to look at their interview experience, including whether they had video interview experience. What was their comfort level with video? Because we assume digital natives are comfortable with video, but that's not actually the case. And also what were their past involvement with peer and self-assessment. The post-questionnaire was meant to look at learning gains in those areas. So did students become more self-aware of their communication skills? What were their attitudes towards this experience, and what would they think about having to do a real one? What was their self-efficacy with video after having this experience? And what value did they find in engaging in peer and self-assessment? Obviously, the major part of the assignment was to prepare their video interview. So students had to create a written response to job interview questions and submit that, but that written response became the script for their video interview. So they recorded the video, and then they were asked to upload it to YouTube as an unlisted video. And then furthermore, that link was uploaded to Peer Scholar, which is a really dynamic peer and self-assessment platform designed by Steve Jordans and Dwayne Perry of the University of Toronto. And this platform is dynamic in that students can upload their assignments, and then they are automatically randomly assigned to at least 5 peers to assess their work anonymously. So once students uploaded their link, they were assigned 5 peers who didn't know that they were being assigned to them, and they in turn were assessed by 5 of their peers. And then the final phase on the Peer Scholar platform is the reflection, where you actually can reflect on the feedback you got and rate whether it was helpful or not. And then finally, I conducted some one-on-one interviews 2 weeks after final marks were posted to gain more qualitative data. So there were some limitations with my method. So the biggest limitation and disappointment was I couldn't use the robust qualitative data from Peer Scholar. When I originally filled out the Research Ethics Board application, there was some question as to whether it would get approved, or it might delay the process because it gathers participant data. So confidentiality issues were thought about there. So even though I was still used the platform because it was part of the assignment, I couldn't use the qualitative data, and there was so much good information from students about how they critiqued others and how they in turn reflected on their own peer assessment. So it's disappointing, but next time definitely we'll get permission. Also, there isn't a validated rubric for video communication skills, and maybe that's something that someone could look at designing as part of a research project. As is often the case with research, generalizability of my findings is a limitation because everyone was an able-bodied college-age student, and they were mostly female. And also the informed consent process. I made a big boo-boo with this because I should know better that not to ask students to sign an informed consent form on the last day of class. But that's what I did. I had informed consent done on the last day of class, and a lot of students don't show up. So I had 60 students between the 2 classes, and 28 students signed the informed consent. So I would do it differently next time. And then the single assignment approach. I would definitely say that maybe doing 2 videos within the course of the program would probably be better, because you'd get to see probably more learning gains than you would with just the 1 assignment. So even though there was limitations with my research, I still had several statistically significant findings. Try and say that 10 times fast. So interestingly, the statistically significant findings primarily were with nonverbal communication skills. So for instance, students' self-perceptions of their ability to use body language while communicating, as well as how they predicted their peers would perceive their ability to use body language while communicating, their scores were much higher on the pre-questionnaire. Also, self-confidence and ability to use eye contact, show enthusiasm, use a variety of facial expressions, use hand gestures and body movement. Students rated themselves a lot higher on the pre-questionnaire than on the post-questionnaire. And a couple of the reasons for that is research finds that students tend to overestimate their abilities in self-assessments. And also I found this interesting reference here that described as the above average effect in an applause society. So students tend to receive more praise than they do critical feedback, which is likely why they rated themselves higher on the pre-questionnaire than the post-questionnaire. With peer assessment, there were a couple of interesting findings. One was that students prefer feedback that is specific. So this one student from the co-op group said, I found it really helpful that multiple peers suggested I use more gestures and body movement, and that I allow my personality to shine through, because these are skills I was unaware I lacked. So that really shows that peer assessment did help create self-awareness of video communication skills through this. And then the second one is that students want feedback as long as it's helpful. So this one student said, knowing what's good about what I'm doing is always good, but I'd rather know what I need to improve on, and that'll just help contribute to me doing better at what it is I'm trying to accomplish. With assessment, peer assessment, I found two unexpected findings. I just happened to analyze these factors sort of without having initially intended to, but found statistically significant results. So I analyzed students' preference for anonymous versus non-anonymous peer feedback, and students prefer to give feedback anonymously. And a possible reason for that is if they're not trained in how to actually assess, they might not have as much confidence, and this could lead to a preference to doing it anonymously. Another thing that I analyzed was behavioral expectations of their peers if their identity was known. So would the feedback be identical or not identical if the identity was known? So students predicted that their own feedback would be absolutely identical if it were not given anonymously, and yet the opposite finding if peers rated them not anonymously, that it wouldn't be the same. So I found that really interesting, and it's kind of telling, something that you could actually research in the future. Why do students believe that? In terms of asynchronous video interviews, a statistically significant finding was that students have greater confidence recording videos of other people versus self-facing videos. So a lot of students commented that it's really awkward to take videos of yourself and to know where to look and so forth. So it's so much easier to take videos of others. But one of the students in the co-op group gave this really nice comment that she appreciated the opportunity to practice this because it's the future of job interviews. And so being able to practice it in a safe environment was really appreciated by this student. And this brings me to Appendix Q. Appendix Q basically started out as just a note paper of me just writing down observations that I've observed while critiquing students' video interviews. Basically, some of the do's and don'ts. So I collated them into 3 distractors. So video quality distractors, environmental distractors, and presentation distractors. So what I'm going to do is show you a brief part of Appendix Q. Hopefully you see that. So I'm going to give everyone access to this. I put it together, tips for recording self-facing videos. But there's quite a few on here, so I'm obviously not going to go through all of them. But one of the ones I wanted to draw attention to was eye contacts and gestures. So one of the the big things with recording self-facing videos is knowing where to look when you're recording it. It's very common for people to look at themselves while they're recording self-facing videos. And it's not narcissistic, it's just that it's awkward to stare at a little round black dot on your computer. So it's more natural to want to talk to another human being, even if that human being is yourself. So one of the things that students can do is they can, or you, is put a little sticky note by the camera lens, and with maybe even a smiley face on it, to kind of remind you of where to look and to smile occasionally while you're recording the self-facing video. Another common problem was lack of gesturing from students. So if a student is able, it's recommended maybe to stand, because with your hands, you're not just going to leave them by your side, you're going to be more inclined to gesture. And if you're not able to stand, even removing yourself from the desk so you're not likely to put your hands on the desk. So gesturing while being on video, it signifies openness and engages the audience. So this appendix, there's quite a few points on there that I put together, and we'll leave a link to this document after the presentation is over. I'm almost, okay, good. Hopefully I didn't mess that up. Okay, so my conclusion. Asynchronous video interviews definitely require a diverse skill set that goes beyond just quality responses to job interview questions. It requires on-camera communication and presentation skills. That requires digital technology skills needed to record self-facing videos. Offering training in video communication skills to students would benefit them and contribute to their success in their job search. And asynchronous video interviews are predicted to be mainstream in the next 2 to 5 years. But with the COVID pandemic, it's fast-tracked video recruiting and the use of video to communicate. Thank you.